afternoon. I am Jennifer Walker Gates, immigration attorney in Austin, Texas with Walker Gates Vela, and I'm here today with our associate attorney, Diego Nunez. Hi, Diego.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for being here. Today in this video, we're talking about how to prepare for your naturalization interview. And the reason that we are addressing this is because we see a number of individuals at the local office who have come to a naturalization interview, and they're not our clients. Our clients, when they go, they're prepared. But sometimes I see individuals who are applying for naturalization who have come to the office and they are not ready for what may be in store. So I want to make sure that everyone who applies for naturalization has the best possible information about how to be ready, because that interview at the USCIS office is arguably the most important moment in your naturalization process. It is a huge deal. That's the moment when you have to pass the test, you have to meet the officer, you have to make a good impression. So we just want to give everybody the best information possible to help them be ready. So we're going to cover 5 main points today that people need to know in order to be prepared for this experience. So Diego, what do you think is the first thing people should do to get ready for the naturalization interview?
All right. So the first thing, once you get that interview notice and it's telling you that you have an upcoming interview, the first thing that you have to do is review your application. Go over the answers that you previously submitted, and if things have changed because circumstances have changed, I would list those things, as well as maybe any mistakes or typos that you catch. And that way, when you get to be in front of the officer, those mistakes or those changes can be made, without really wasting much time. Now, the assumption here is that once you get that interview, you have been studying for your test, so that hopefully by the time that you get that notice, you are ready for your civics, English test, which includes reading, writing, and basically your comprehension of the language. So those are things that you should definitely do as soon as you get your interview notice.
Yes, I agree that if you wait to start studying for that test until you get the interview notice, it is unlikely that you're going to have enough time to learn all of that material. Typically, interviews are scheduled 2 to 3 weeks in advance. Some people might be able to memorize everything in time, but I wouldn't risk that. I would definitely start studying as soon as your application is submitted. The other assumption that your response includes, Diego, is that applicants have kept a copy of their N400, of the N400 that they submitted to USCIS. And this is really important, but unfortunately it is something that I see, a mistake that I see with some regularity. People come to us and want us to jump in on a case, but they haven't kept a copy of the application that they filed. So keeping that copy is incredibly important. Especially if if there's any issue at all later on, you're definitely going to have a copy of that thing.
Right. And I recently got a question from a client, and they thought that we would be able to just jump on our computer and get the application they submitted to immigration off the internet. And unfortunately, it does not work that way. So keep a copy.
However, now applicants for naturalization, if they're able to create an online USCIS account, oftentimes can pull up a copy of their application. Yes. It's just for an attorney to be able to do that requires a lot of back and forth between attorney and client, and some coordinated efforts getting online, sending codes and stuff like that. So it is more cumbersome and difficult for us to be able to do that, but it is not impossible anymore for N400s.
Yeah.
it is still impossible for many other types of applications. So, and regardless, keep a copy of whatever you submit.
Yeah. Yeah. Just keep a copy.
Keep a copy,
Yeah.
a hard copy off the internet. You never know, it can't hurt to have an additional copy of that thing. It's really important. So, okay, Diego. So after looking at the application itself and making any updates and corrections, what is the next thing people need to do to get ready for that appointment?
Well, they should gather their documents. So one of the things that we do for our clients is we'll give them like a little file, like a pocket file folder, so that they can put important documents, that they can take with them or provide us with. And that's one of the things that you should do. That notice that you get will have a list of documents. And so you can review the interview notice and it'll have them. But there are some things that you absolutely need to have when you go there. And one of them is your proof of residency. So that usually comes in the form of your permanent resident card or your green card. The other is the actual interview notice. So when you get that interview notice, save that interview notice. Because the officers that you're going to meet at the front of the building to get in are going to ask for it. Now, there are some cases that may be more complicated that require other things to take. And so some of these cases, you and I have talked before that if you require these things, you should be probably going with an attorney. But for instance, criminal dispositions, criminal charges or dismissals, if you've had a prior immigration deportation case, those kinds of things, sometimes the officers will need to see it because they may not have everything that they need in order to make their decision. And if they can't make a decision that day, then they will postpone it because they're going to give you a request for evidence. And so these are some of the things that you should take. One other required item that they don't always ask for is your state issued ID. And I had an officer tell me the reason that they ask for it is they want to make sure that they're the proper jurisdiction to decide on your case. So if your ID has a different address, but now you're living in, a different jurisdiction, just make sure to take something proving your address.
Yeah.
But that doesn't come up too often.
No. I've had sometimes now if a person is applying on the basis of 3 years of marriage to a U.S. citizen, then there is also a requirement to provide evidence that you remain in a bona fide marriage with that U.S. citizen and you are still living in a marital union with that person. You can't be living separately, and you need to provide evidence of that. And that can be in the form of bills. It can be in the form of bank statements with the common address and the shared account. It can take any number of forms, but that will be important for those applicants. In addition to tax returns. Now, in my experience, USCIS officers almost never ask to see tax returns. They just simply ask, have you filed taxes and do you owe any taxes? But in the rare instance that they do ask for it, it's better to have them handy than have to send them in and wait for a decision on your case. So I think, I generally do advise people in those folders that we give them, put your 5 years of tax returns or 3 years of tax returns, depending on which category you're filing under.
Yeah, that just goes under better safe than sorry.
Totally. All right, Diego. So they're going to review their N-400, make any corrections. They're going to get their documents together that they have to have. Then what? What's number 3?
Well, you should, if you've never been to the immigration office that you are going to be interviewed in, know where it is and arrive early. And so, traffic should not be an excuse. So, give yourself a 30-minute, hour-long buffer in order to get there on time. You never know what traffic can be that day or the weather conditions. And so arriving early is key. And another way, another thing to make sure that you arrive early is knowing how to get there. And so we all have great apps on our phones that will tell us how to get places. But if you have spotty service on your phone, then print out the directions on how to get to your USCIS office. Once you arrive there, now because of COVID and all the precautions, then just follow the instructions that might be posted at the door or they are given by the guard at the door.
Yeah, agreed. Now, Diego, have you ever had this? I've had a situation before where I was on my way to meet a client for an interview, and the interstate highway completely shut down because of just a massive accident. And I was stuck for like 4 hours on I-35 without being able to move. What happens in a situation like that? Is the client, if that happens to an applicant, is their case going to be denied? What's going to happen?
Well, if you can, if the U.S. Citizenship Immigration Service office building is still open, you should still arrive on time. You should arrive even if you're late and notify them about what happened. And if let's say it's such a chaotic accident that you can't even get there before closing, then what you have to do is call the 800 number and notify them of the incident and requesting a new appointment. And because I have OCD, I would probably send out a mailed, request as well on top of the phone call, just to make sure that I get rescheduled. But you should not be penalized for things that are out of your control.
Agreed. You're an attorney, so you're paid to have OCD.
Yeah.
But the idea of calling that 1-800 number, even like before you're late, like if you are on your way and you're in an accident or you're stuck behind an accident and you think you are going to not make it on time, I think that's the moment when I would try to go ahead and make that phone call and notify them even ahead of time of what is going on. But again, Diego is correct. It's not a grounds for panic. You will be given another opportunity. And if you're not, and this has happened too, and especially in the last 3 years where, someone had a situation like that or was ill and definitely provided notice ahead of time that they were ill and not able to attend their appointment. And then they got a denial notice. And we were able to get those cases reopened without the client having to pay any additional filing fees or anything like that. But that was because they were able to recognize that it was their error. And so, it ended up being fine. It just caused the client some anxiety in the meantime. So, if you do have a situation like that, just be ready to communicate, document your communication, and then be ready to respond if they try to pull any funny business. But generally speaking, in my experience, in situations like that, they do reschedule people. All right, so review your application, get your documents together, arrive early if you possibly can. And then what is your fourth most important point, Diego?
Okay, so you're in the office. They've already, they've already called your number, and you're in front of the officer. You're going to be sworn in, and then after that, the process begins. And it usually begins with the exam. Some interviewers will go straight for the application questions. Either way, what you have to do is listen carefully. Listen to what's being asked. I always tell clients when you're asked a question, think about what's being asked, think about the answer, give the answer, be direct. And it can be processed in a second. And you will, hopefully be answering the question that they're asking. It's normal to be nervous and to not hear things correctly. And if that is what happens, you can always ask for them to repeat, can you please repeat the question? Or if you don't understand the question, you can always ask, can you please explain, what you're asking? But the key thing is to answer the question directly. And one of the things that we've also talked about is our nervous clients that will not listen carefully and will just start spilling their guts to the officer. And it just creates for a longer interview. If you have a nice officer, they will try to calm you down. If you have someone that maybe has had a rough day, they're probably not going to be amused, and you will probably upset them. And so listening carefully is key, and answering directly is key.
Agreed. If someone has an officer who, I've had this situation a number of times where most applicants for naturalization, English is not their first language, right? And many USCIS officers also do not speak English as their first language. And so two individuals speaking English who both have an accent, potentially from different parts of the world, and there can be some communication and understanding breakdowns. And then if the client is already very nervous, they feel ashamed and intimidated about asking for clarification, and that can lead to some problems. What are the rules about English speaking and understanding and speaking English so that people can feel comfortable asking an officer to repeat him or herself?
Well, so the rules in the process, the whole English part of the test is to, you don't have to be an English professor in order to pass the exam. There has to be understandable communication and interaction with the officer. And so, yes, sometimes people will feel nervous about asking a question because they'll fear that, oh, I don't understand what's being asked because I don't speak English. But if you communicate it well, it's going to be, I do understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. I just don't understand the sense that they're making when they're putting them together. I would say that the majority of immigration officers are going to understand that, and they're going to they're going to explain what's happening. Now, if you have an officer that crosses that line and is no longer and they don't have to be nice. That's the other thing, is that they don't have to be nice, but they do have to be professional. They're considered professionals, and we expect them to behave so. And if they cross the line where they're no longer being professional and they've become insulting in one way or another, or accusatory, well, you can stand up for yourself. And that means that you can, request for them to stop. And you can also ask to speak to their immediate supervisor. And then, once that happens, though, be prepared to explain to the supervisor what happened, why you're asking for them to be there, and whether you want a new interview to be scheduled with a different officer, or whether you want the supervisor to be there for the remainder of the interview. Now, that might happen, and I think it usually happens when an attorney is not around. I know I look super, super young, Jennifer, but in my 20 years of experience, I do remember this happening about maybe once, about 16 years ago or so. This was still in Minnesota. And I asked to speak to a supervisor, and I feel we got a remedy that we needed. But it can happen, and usually, if it does, it's when an individual is not with an attorney.
Correct. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I've had, also in my career, twice where I've had to ask for a supervisor because the officer really lost his cool and was very, very inappropriate. But you're correct in my experience. And this brings us to point number 5, which is be ready for the worst case scenario. 99.9% of the time, worst case scenario is not going to happen, which I would say worst case scenario is an officer is behaving unethically, unprofessionally, unlawfully, right? And if they're making disparaging remarks about you, what your appearance, your gender, your sexuality, your religion, If they're making personal disparaging remarks about you and who you are as a person, that is illegal, not allowed, and they have to be called out on it. Now, if you're a person who is not prepared to advocate for yourself in a situation like that, then we do recommend taking an attorney with you as an advocate, as another witness. Most of the time, I don't say a word in those interviews, really. I may help just clarify if there's any kind of misunderstanding or something like that. But a lot of times, I don't really say much. I'm just there as a witness to ensure that my clients are treated respectfully and within the bounds of the law, in case we are unlucky enough to get one of the bad apples. Most USCIS officers behave well. They follow the law, they follow the rules, they follow their training. And then you have a handful, of course, who don't. The 5 most important points, one more time, would be, once you get your notice, you hopefully will have prepared by then. You need to, review your application, review your N-400, gather your documents together, be ready to arrive early for your appointment, listen to what the officer is saying and respond directly to the question being asked, and then be ready to handle the worst case scenario for yourself. And I think, if people are able to cover those 5 points, then they should be pretty well prepared.
Yeah, no, I think those are the most basic and important points. And I think a good night's rest is probably, the night before is probably a good idea. But
definitely.
Follow those points. And if you do have if you feel like you have a more complicated situation, talk to an attorney. Just go over it so that it can give you peace of mind, and maybe you will learn whether you need to worry about it and hire someone, or maybe you don't. So
yes, sorry about that phone ringing.
And I think that's it.
Definitely recommended to have an attorney present if you have any kind of criminal history, any kind of complicated immigration issue, or if you just don't feel comfortable, standing up for yourself and advocating for yourself in a situation with a government agent. All of those situations are good for, hiring someone to accompany you to the interview. And we love to do that. We do that with clients all the time. So if we can help with doing that for you, we would love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at walkergatesfellow.com. On our website, you can click to call us or click to schedule a consultation. If you have questions or comments about the contents of this video, please leave them for us in a comment underneath the video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be posting regular updates here about points just like this that can be helpful for immigrants in the United States. So thank you, Diego, for joining me today. I look forward to doing this again soon, and I appreciate your time and your expertise.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.